Hello everyone. Today I want to share a story with you. A soft emotional story about a small deer, a young boy, and a lesson that can change the way you understand waiting, trust, and God's timing in your life. In a quiet valley surrounded by tall mountains, gentle rivers, and endless green fields, where the mornings were calm and the air always smelled fresh, there lived a boy named Elias. Elias was thoughtful, kind-hearted, and full of dreams about the future. He dreamed of becoming strong, independent, and capable of helping his family and his village. But inside his heart there was one struggle that followed him everywhere. Elias hated waiting. He wanted answers quickly, results immediately, and signs right now. Whenever life moved slowly, he felt frustrated, believing that delay meant denial, believing that if something did not happen fast, it would never happen at all. One early morning, when the sky was still painted with soft shades of blue and gold, and the world felt quiet and untouched, Elias walked toward the edge of the forest to gather water from the stream. The grass was still wet with morning dew, and the sound of birds echoed gently between the trees like a peaceful song. As he walked deeper along the narrow path, he heard a faint sound, soft and trembling, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. It was not loud, but it was full of fear. Elias stopped, listened carefully, and followed the sound until he found a small deer lying near a fallen tree. Its leg was injured, bent awkwardly, and its chest moved quickly as it struggled to breathe calmly. The little deer's eyes were wide, filled with fear and pain, and when Elias knelt down, his heart softened instantly. He spoke quietly, almost as if afraid to scare it, telling the deer that it was safe now, that it was not alone. Even though the deer could not understand his words, it seemed to feel his calm presence, and its breathing slowly eased. Carefully, Elias guided the small deer toward a sheltered spot near his home, creating a safe place with leaves, blankets, and water. Every day he returned to check on it, bringing food, cleaning the wound, and sitting beside it in silence. He named the deer Luma, meaning light, because even in its weakness, it reminded him of something gentle and pure. Days passed, and Luma slowly began to heal, but not as fast as Elias wanted. Each morning, he would look at the deer and feel impatience rise in his chest. He wondered why it still could not stand properly, why it was not running freely yet, why progress felt so slow. Waiting felt heavy to him, like time was working against him. One afternoon, as Elias sighed loudly beside the resting deer, his grandmother noticed his frustration. She sat next to him and spoke softly, reminding him that healing cannot be rushed and that growth happens quietly, often unseen. Elias listened but did not fully understand. In his mind, waiting felt like wasting time, like losing control. That night, under the silver glow of the moon, Elias sat beside Luma again, watching the deer's slow, steady breathing. He whispered that it needed to try harder, that it needed to stand, believing that pushing meant helping, believing that effort alone could replace time. Inside his heart, impatience disguised itself as concern. The next morning, before the sun fully rose, Elias felt a sudden determination. The sky was painted with pink and gold, and the world felt full of possibility. He gently encouraged Luma to stand, guiding it forward, believing that a small push might help it regain strength. For a moment, the deer tried, trembling, struggling, and then it collapsed again, weaker than before. The sound of its fall echoed loudly in Elias's heart. He rushed forward, fear filling his chest as he saw the deer lying still, frightened and exhausted. Guilt washed over him like a heavy wave, and his hands trembled as he whispered apologies through tears. In that moment, Elias understood pain not as impatience, but as regret. That night, Elias could not sleep. He sat quietly beside the deer, replaying his actions over and over in his mind, asking himself why he had rushed, why he had not listened, why he had tried to control what was never meant to be forced. His grandmother joined him, placing her hand gently on his shoulder, her voice calm and steady. She told him that sometimes things do not happen when we want them to because God sees what we cannot see, that delays are not punishments, but protection, and that God's timing is always guided by wisdom, not haste. She reminded him that strength comes when the time is right, not when we demand it. Those words settled deep in Elias's heart, bringing a quiet peace he had never felt before. He realized that both he and the deer needed time, patience, and trust. From that day on, Elias changed. He stopped rushing. He cared for Luma gently, without expectations, without pressure. He allowed the days to pass naturally, trusting the process instead of fighting it. Slowly, almost unnoticed, the deer grew stronger. Its movements became steady, its eyes bright, its posture confident. One clear morning, when the sky stretched wide and blue and sunlight filled the valley with warmth, Elias approached Luma with calm hands and an open heart. This time he did not push or guide. He simply stepped back. The deer stood on its own, steady and strong, and after a quiet moment, it ran. Not stumbling, not struggling, but running freely into the open field, its body moving with grace and confidence. Elias watched with tears in his eyes, not of sadness, but of understanding and gratitude. In that moment, something inside him changed forever. He understood that waiting does not mean failure, that delays are not endings, and that God's plan unfolds exactly when it should. The deer did not run earlier because it was not ready, and Elias did not understand earlier because he was not ready either. But through patience, both had grown. The valley looked brighter, the sky felt wider, and Elias's heart felt peaceful, filled with trust and faith. So if you ever feel tired of waiting, if life feels slow, confusing, or unfair, remember the story. Remember the deer that ran when the time was right. Remember the boy who learned to trust the journey. Take a deep breath, trust God's plan, trust God's timing, and believe that every delay carries a purpose greater than you can see right now. As days passed after that moment, Elias noticed that the lesson did not end with the deer running freely into the valley, because something deeper had begun to move inside him, something quiet but powerful, like roots growing beneath the soil where no one could see. He began to notice how often in his own life he had tried to force answers, rush outcomes, and demand clarity before he was ready to receive it. He remembered his dreams, his worries, his silent prayers whispered at night, and he finally understood that many of them were not unanswered. They were simply waiting for the right season. The forest around him felt different now, not because it had changed, but because he had. The wind through the trees sounded softer. The river flowed with a calming rhythm, and even silence no longer felt empty. It felt full of meaning. Elias started waking up earlier each morning, not to hurry through the day, but to sit quietly and watch the sunrise spread slowly across the sky. He learned that light never rushes, yet it always arrives. He helped his family with patience, spoke with kindness instead of frustration, and listened more than he talked. When challenges appeared, he no longer panicked. Instead, he remembered Luma, remembered how strength comes quietly, how healing works invisibly, and how God prepares us long before he presents the moment. Waiting stopped feeling like punishment and started feeling like preparation. Sometimes Elias would see Luma at the edge of the field, standing tall, healthy, and alert, and the deer would look at him for a brief moment before disappearing into the forest again. Each time, Elias felt gratitude instead of attachment, understanding that some blessings come into our lives not to stay forever, but to teach us something we will carry forever. He understood that God removes impatience not by force, but by experience, and that true faith is not believing that things will happen quickly, but trusting that they will happen correctly. And so, if you are watching this now and your heart feels tired from waiting, if your prayers feel unanswered, if your dreams feel delayed, remember this truth. God is not late, he is precise. What feels slow is often protection. What feels silent is often preparation. You are not being forgotten, you are being shaped. Just like the deer needed time to run, and the boy needed time to understand, you too are growing in ways you cannot yet see. Trust the process, trust the waiting, and trust that when the moment arrives, you will be strong enough, ready enough, and wise enough to receive what God has been preparing for you all along. With time, Elias began to realize that patience was not something you suddenly achieve, but something you practice every day in small, quiet moments when no one is watching and nothing dramatic seems to be happening. There were days when old feelings tried to return, moments when impatience knocked softly on his heart, reminding him of how he used to rush, worry, and doubt. But now, instead of reacting, Elias paused. He breathed deeply and remembered the lesson the forest had taught him, that growth is not loud, and transformation does not announce itself. God works in silence, shaping hearts the same way he shapes mountains, slowly, steadily, and with purpose. Elias also noticed how many people around him were struggling with the same hidden battle. He saw neighbors worried about their future, friends frustrated by delays, and elders carrying regrets about things they tried to force long ago. And without preaching or correcting anyone, Elias changed simply by example. His calm presence, his steady faith, and his quiet trust became a light others felt, even if they could not explain why. They saw that peace did not come from having everything immediately, but from believing that what is meant for you cannot miss you, and what misses you was never meant to stay. One evening, as the sky turned deep orange and the world slowed down, Elias sat alone by the river, reflecting on the path his life was taking. He understood that not every prayer is answered with a gift. Some are answered with growth, some with wisdom, and some with the strength to wait without losing hope. He felt gratitude for the pain he once felt, because it led him to understanding, and gratitude for the delay he once hated, because it protected him from moving too soon. In that still moment, Elias felt something settle gently in his heart, a quiet assurance that God was walking with him even when nothing seemed to be happening. He realized that faith is not trusting God only when things make sense, but trusting Him especially when they do not. Waiting, he now knew, was not empty time, it was sacred time, time in which God prepares both the blessing and the person who will receive it. So if you are in a season where doors seem closed, paths feel unclear, and answers feel far away, remember this story. Remember that the forest does not rush to bloom, the river does not hurry to reach the sea, and yet both fulfill their purpose perfectly. In the same way, your life is unfolding exactly as it should. Trust God's timing, even when it tests your patience. Trust His plan, even when you cannot see it. And know with certainty that what He is preparing for you will arrive not a moment too early, not a moment too late, but exactly when your heart is ready to receive it. As the seasons slowly changed and the valley moved from warm days into cooler evenings, Elias discovered that patience was no longer something he forced himself to practice, but something that lived naturally inside him, shaping his thoughts, his reactions, and the way he faced uncertainty. He noticed how problems still appeared, how life still tested him, but the weight they carried felt different now, lighter because he no longer fought against time. He understood that time was not his enemy, but a quiet partner in God's work, doing what human hands and hurried minds could never do alone. Elias began to understand that many people suffer not because they are weak, but because they try to harvest fruits before the roots have grown strong enough to hold them. He reflected on how often he once prayed for change without being ready for responsibility, how often he asked for answers without being prepared to live by them. And instead of feeling ashamed, he felt grateful, because growth had met him exactly where he was, not when he demanded it, but when he finally surrendered control. There were evenings when Elias would walk through the same forest path where he once found the injured deer, and each step felt symbolic, reminding him of who he was before and who he was becoming. The trees stood tall and patient, having grown through storms, droughts, and long silent years. They did not complain about how long it took to grow. They simply grew. In their stillness, Elias saw the reflection of God's wisdom, a reminder that what lasts is never rushed. Sometimes doubt returned quietly, whispering questions into his mind, asking if waiting was truly worth it, asking if faith would truly be rewarded. But now Elias knew that doubt was not an enemy either. It was an invitation to deepen trust. He learned that faith is not the absence of questions, but the courage to keep walking even when answers are delayed. Each time uncertainty appeared, Elias responded not with fear, but with stillness, trusting that clarity would arrive in its proper time. As months passed, Elias noticed subtle changes in his own character. He became slower to anger, gentler with words, and stronger in silence. He no longer measured progress by speed, but by depth. He no longer chased outcomes, but focused on becoming the kind of person who could handle them. And in doing so, he realized something powerful. God often delays the blessing not because he is withholding, but because he is protecting both the gift and the receiver from breaking under premature weight. One quiet night, as stars filled the sky and the world felt vast and mysterious, Elias reflected on how life had once felt like a race he was losing. Now it felt like a journey unfolding exactly as it should. He realized that comparison had once stolen his peace, watching others move faster, achieve sooner, and celebrate earlier. But now he understood that every path is different, every season unique, and that God's plan cannot be copied, rushed, or compared. Elias also learned that patience does not mean doing nothing. It means doing what you can, faithfully, while trusting God with what you cannot control. It means planting seeds even when you may not live to see the harvest. It means showing up with hope even when results remain invisible. This understanding gave his life a quiet strength, a confidence that did not depend on immediate success, but on deep alignment with purpose. As word spread of Elias's calm presence and thoughtful nature, people began to seek him out, not for answers, but for peace. They sat beside him and spoke of their worries, their fears, their impatience with life. And Elias listened, not as someone who had everything figured out, but as someone who had learned how to wait without despair. He shared his story gently, not as advice, but as a reminder that God's timing never humiliates us, it prepares us. He spoke of the deer, of the mistake he made by rushing, and of the lesson that changed him forever. He reminded them that forcing growth often leads to pain, while trusting the process leads to strength. And as he spoke, people felt something settle inside them, a sense of relief, a permission to stop fighting time and start trusting it. Years later, Elias would look back on that season of his life and realize it was not a delay at all, but a foundation. Everything meaningful that came afterward stood firmly because it was built slowly. His faith became deeper, his decisions wiser, and his heart more resilient. He no longer feared waiting seasons, because he understood they were sacred spaces where God does his most important work. So if you are still waiting, still hoping, still praying, know this: your waiting is not wasted. Your silence is not ignored. Your tears are not unseen. God is working in ways you cannot measure, preparing outcomes that require patience to receive. Just as the deer needed time to run, and Elias needed time to understand, you too are being shaped for something greater than you imagine. Trust the process, trust the delay, and trust that when the moment arrives, you will look back and realize that God's plan was not only better than yours, it was perfect all along. And even after all those realizations, Elias understood that the lesson of waiting would return many times throughout his life, wearing different faces, appearing in new situations, because patience is not learned once and kept forever, it is learned again and again at every stage of growth. There would be moments when opportunities seemed close but not reachable, when doors appeared half open and then closed again, when life tested his trust with silence instead of answers. And in those moments Elias would remember the valley, the forest, and the deer, and his heart would remain steady. He learned that God often gives us reminders instead of explanations, and those reminders are enough to keep us moving forward without fear. Elias came to see that waiting is where character is formed, where humility replaces control, and where faith becomes real instead of theoretical. Anyone can trust when things move fast and results appear quickly, but true trust is revealed when progress is slow and outcomes are uncertain. And in those slow seasons, Elias discovered a deeper connection with God, one built not on urgency, but on surrender. He stopped asking when and started asking how he could grow while waiting, and that question alone transformed the way he experienced time. As life continued to unfold, Elias carried this quiet wisdom with him, understanding that some prayers are answered immediately, some are answered eventually, and some are answered by changing us instead of changing our circumstances. He accepted that God's plan often unfolds one step at a time, revealing just enough light for the next move, never the entire path at once. And that was enough. It had always been enough. So if you are still in that place of waiting, feeling unseen, unheard, or unsure, let this story rest in your heart. Let it remind you that delays are not denials, Silence is not abandonment, and slow seasons are not wasted seasons. God is shaping you with intention, aligning your strength with your future, and preparing you for what you have been asking for. Stay faithful, stay patient, and keep trusting, because when the moment finally arrives, you will understand that every step, every pause, and every delay was leading you exactly where you were meant to be.